Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're exploring a narrative of truly incredible historical magnitude. We're going to examine the origins of a faith that fundamentally shaped half the world. We're talking about a movement that transformed from a quiet moment sparked by one single individual into a massive global civilization. So let's dive into the historical origins of Islam from 570 to 632 AD.
Okay, let's really set the scene here. In 610 AD, a man walked into a cave just outside Mecca.
Just 23 years later, the entire Arabian Peninsula had fundamentally changed its religion.
And 100 years after that, Islam had reached Spain, Persia, Central Asia, and all the way to the borders of China. No movement in human history spread this far, this fast, from such a remarkably small beginning.
So how exactly did a movement spread that far, that fast, from such a tiny origin point? That is the core question we're answering today. Because, this isn't just a religious event. It's honestly one of the most extraordinary social, political, and cultural transformations the ancient world had ever seen. To understand how this unprecedented shift actually happened, we have to look closely at where it all began.
To really grasp this, we've got to look at the deeply fragmented society of pre-Islamic Arabia. In the 6th century, the Arabian Peninsula wasn't a unified country at all. Actually, it was a patchwork of hundreds of fiercely independent tribes. They were bound together only by blood loyalty and strict honor codes. There was absolutely no central government, no standing army, and no unified legal system whatsoever. If you had a dispute, well, it was settled by warfare or blood money, and those vendettas, they could last for generations. The economy ran primarily on trade along these great ancient caravan routes, and honestly, when tribes weren't trading, they were often raiding. Religiously, it was an incredibly diverse place. You had Arab polytheists, Jewish tribes, Christian communities, Zoroastrians. It was a tough, decentralized, and highly competitive world.
And sitting right in the middle of a barren, waterless valley in this harsh landscape was Mecca. Now, Mecca really shouldn't have existed. It couldn't grow food, it had only one real well, the Zamzam, but its immense power rested entirely on the Quraysh tribe's absolute control over two things, the major trade routes and the Kaaba. The Kaaba was an ancient cubic structure that held 360 different idols representing deities from tribes all across the peninsula. Because of this, Mecca became Arabia's protected religious and economic center. Pilgrims naturally flocked there, bringing massive wealth to the Quraysh, who enforced a sacred truce that strictly forbade any violence within the city. Essentially, the Quraysh had built an incredibly lucrative empire on this status quo.
At the center of this incredible transformation is one man. Before 610 AD, Muhammad ibn Abdullah lived a highly respected, fairly ordinary life. He was orphaned very young and raised by his uncle Abu Talib. He grew up to be a merchant, and he was trusted so deeply by his community to resolve disputes that they actually called him Al-Amin, meaning the trustworthy. He was employed by a wealthy widow named Khadija, whom he later married in what was a profoundly strong, loving partnership. For 15 years, he just lived the quiet life of a successful Meccan merchant. But everything changed when he turned 40.
You see, Muhammad frequently retreated to a cave on Mount Hira for solitude, and in 610 AD, Islamic tradition records that the angel Gabriel appeared to him with a terrifying command, Iqra, meaning read or recite. Shaking and profoundly distressed, Muhammad literally stumbled down the mountain, completely terrified that he was losing his mind. He went straight to Khadija, and her response? It's genuinely one of the most historically pivotal moments of this entire era. She didn't doubt him for a second. She wrapped him in a cloak and completely validated his experience, telling him that a man of his honest and generous character would never, ever be abandoned by God. The very first Muslim was a woman.
Now, what is absolutely crucial to understand here is who actually made up this early community. It was not the powerful elite. It was Khadija. It was Muhammad's young cousin, Ali. It was his close friend, Abu Bakr. And it was Bilal, an enslaved Abyssinian man. These were largely marginalized people, and they were drawn to a radical message, that there is only one God, that all humans are entirely equal, and that the wealthy owe a fundamental duty to the poor. For the Quraysh elite, let me be clear, this was not just a theological disagreement. This message directly threatened their economic supremacy and their entire social hierarchy.
When Muhammad began preaching this publicly around 613 AD, the Quraysh response was remarkably swift and brutal, and they targeted the most vulnerable first. Enslaved believers like Bilal were literally dragged into the burning desert, laid on the scorching sand with massive boulders crushed against their chests, and ordered to renounce their faith. Yet Bilal simply repeated, Ahad, Ahad, meaning God is one. Believers who had tribal protection faced total economic boycotts and severe social ostracism. But what is truly remarkable historically is the community's response. strict, unwavering nonviolence. For years, despite facing unimaginable torture and even death, the early Muslims utterly refused to fight back. This intense persecution led to a genuinely brilliant stroke of strategic diplomacy. By 615 AD, the conditions in Mecca were so unlivable that Muhammad sent a group of about 80 followers to seek asylum across the sea in Abyssinia, which was a Christian kingdom ruled by King Negus. Naturally, the Quraysh sent envoys to drag them right back. But the Muslim representative, Jafar, stood before the Christian king and recited Quranic verses that deeply, beautifully affirmed their reverence for Jesus and the Virgin Mary. Moved to tears, King Negus offered them his full protection. This was a masterclass in strategy, explicitly positioning Islam right within the broader Abrahamic tradition.
But despite that incredible diplomatic victory abroad, back in Mecca, disaster struck. The year 619 AD is known in the history books as the Year of Sorrow, because within a span or just months, Muhammad lost the two people who mattered most in the world to him. Khadija, his emotional anchor, his very first believer, passed away. And his uncle Abu Talib, the head of his clan, the man who had provided his vital tribal shield against the Quraysh, also died. With the new clan leader immediately withdrawing protection, Muhammad was suddenly left entirely, dangerously vulnerable to his enemies.
Desperate, utterly desperate to find a new safe haven and some allies, Muhammad walked 60 miles through incredibly harsh terrain to the wealthy city of Taif. He simply asked for their protection. Instead, they brutally mocked him. The city's leaders actually ordered the children and enslaved people to chase him out, pelting him with stones. He was driven out of the city gates, his shoes literally filling with his own blood. Taking shelter in a nearby garden, completely exhausted, battered, and alone, he offered a deeply, profoundly human prayer. He pleaded for direction. He expressed his utter vulnerability, and he asked only that God not be angry with him. It is a moment of just incredible, profound human resilience in the face of total despair.
Following that immense, devastating low point, the historical narrative shifts dramatically. Around 621 AD, Islamic tradition records the night journey, or the Isra and Miraj. In a single night, Muhammad is transported from Mecca to Jerusalem and then ascends through the heavens. He meets the earlier prophets, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, and he receives the commandment for the 5 daily prayers. Historically speaking, this event was absolutely pivotal. It fundamentally cemented Islam's deep theological connection to the legacy of the earlier Abrahamic faiths, and it gave those heavily persecuted believers a profound sense of meaning and endurance.
And then we hit the turning point. The year 622 AD. The major breakthrough didn't actually come from Mecca. It came from an oasis city to the north called Yathrib, which would later be known as Medina. After some intense, secret negotiations, the heavily fractured tribes of Medina offered Muhammad protection and leadership if he would come and arbitrate their disputes. So, the Muslims migrated. This event, the Hijra, is so monumentally important that it officially marks the birth of the Islamic State, and it serves as the very first year of the Islamic calendar.
Looking back over this incredible timeline, the historical arc is just undeniable. This was a movement of radical equality that crashed into a deeply entrenched society built entirely on hierarchy and wealth. These early believers faced economic starvation. They faced brutal physical torture, heartbreaking exile, and the devastating loss of their closest supporters. At any single moment during those years, this movement could have collapsed entirely, but it refused to stop, and within just a century, it sparked a civilization that completely transformed the globe.
But before the massive empires, before the global civilization, it began with one man, walking down a mountain, shaking. And she believed him. It really leaves us to wonder, doesn't it? If one single moment of unwavering belief can eventually transform half the globe, what does that tell us about the sheer power of human conviction in the face of the impossible?